Hello, everybody, and welcome to Kato Reviews, where every month we outsource every month with an asterisk. We outsource an anime for us to watch in its entirety from patreon.com/KatoIT, then review it for you all here. I am your ancient songstress, Hoodie, and as always, I'm joined by my musical song baby thing, Zero. I guess that was a bit of a spoiler. Whoopsies. This month, as per the request of Wadzane Mafunde, we have watched the anime Lost Song. Technically, it was supposed to be last month, but we fucked up, and I apologize on that. If you want your chance at our next review, head on over to our Patreon for details. Link is in the description. First things first, before we usually, at the top of these things, after that whole rigmarole, we go into like a short description of what the show is for any of you guys who haven't seen it. Before we do that, I kind of want to just start off with my review, or my recommendation, rather, because I kind of want this to be seen spoiler-free. You know, I know there's a big debate about, like, do spoilers matter, whatever. I think in this case, I would have had my experience potentially ruined if I knew, like, the direction of this series. So getting this out of the way, I do think this is an interesting show. This isn't a recommendation that says, like, for Psychopaths, where I just said, this is good, watch it. This is not that. It's not just amazing. I think it fails in very interesting ways and succeeds in very interesting ways. And I think, you know, part of the reason why I'm so comfortable just recommending this to kind of anyone is because, you know, if you're watching our channel, then you're probably interested in sort of being able to, you know, looking at something a little deeper, you know, and seeing why something fails might interest you. Now, also, it is only 12 episodes, and I do think I would recommend, you know, if I wasn't obligated to watch this entire thing, I probably would have dropped off after, like, a couple episodes. I am telling you, even if you watch, like, 3-4 episodes, you're like, this isn't for me, keep going. I'm not going to tell you what episode where things get, you know, crazy, because that in itself is kind of a spoiler. But I do think, you know, hey, this has, like, the Hoodie seal of approval with an asterisk. Hoodie seal of approval, not because it's good, but because it's interesting. So if you have, like, 4 hours to just kill, and you want to watch something, I would recommend watching Lost Song. It is on Netflix, as far as I know. All right. I don't know if you have anything to tag on there, Zero. If not, then just hit us with that pitch. What is Lost Song?
Well, I guess I'd recommend this to probably anyone who doesn't care that much about, like, nuanced dialogue and is fine with things being fairly straightforward for pretty much the entire ride. I guess if also someone who likes shows that tug on their heartstrings, like Clannad or whatever.
We could go a little bit more into because we'll have more to say when we could talk about spoilers. I just wanted to get that up front just to, you know, the non-spoiler recommendation. There you go. Watch that. But
right.
we're going to talk a little bit more about that at the end.
Sure. So back to the summary. A young, scientifically inclined brother and a sweet, magically empowered sister want to visit the capital of wherever they are, but they have no idea how to get there because buses haven't been invented. So it's just like a dream for them. Until one day, they stumble upon a wounded soldier, and the girl uses her Song of Healing, which her grandfather forbade her from ever using, and as thanks, he agrees to, help them get to the capital one day. Unfortunately, this is overheard by a soldier who takes the information to his superiors, and of course, they attack the village to get the singing girl's healing powers. And, having nowhere else to go once their village is destroyed, they make their way to the capital, encounter a pretty blue-haired girl with her titties all the way out.
All the way.
As well as some nice rhythmist girls, and, they get into some wacky misadventures. However, Rin can't just move on with her life, because she hears a distant cry for help. See, we also have Finis, another magic singing girl, who, she's being forced to sing for the military to destroy her enemies and heal the army and whatnot. And her life sucks. We kind of get the sense that the same would happen to Rin if she was ever discovered. Despite that, Rin feels the constant urge to go help this Finis woman.
Okay, I'd like to stop you there. Just before, so basically, the premise of this is just it's like set in sort of I don't know, ancient medieval, I guess you could maybe call it.
Yeah.
And it's just about these two girls who have powers and they could sing and use those powers. That's the basic premise. Now, before we get to like, because there is a conceit to the series that is different than that, and that doesn't come until much later, which is interesting. But before we even get to that, I kind of just want to talk about expectations going into this and sort of, you know, as those continued, because to me, I had, when I first started taking down notes, I was like 1 or 2 episodes in, and I was thinking like, all right, you know, in my head, knowing that we were going to review this, I was thinking like, all right, recommendations, what does this look like? And the first thing that popped in my head, I was like, well, it's kind of cutesy, it seems fairly wholesome, you know, there was that, you know, really dramatic moment at the end of the first episode where her sister dies, but, you know, for the most part, you know, especially looking at like the character designs, it was just, I would have described it as cutesy. And to me, that sort of seemed not quite this, but like I thought if you like Little Witch Academia, it's not the exact same style, but it seemed like, okay, maybe it's like kind of like this. And this was just something I like compartmentalized as I watched the show. And, you know, every once in a while, and this is kind of be a big overarching criticism I have of the show, is that its art style is actually a huge failure. And that's actually disappointing, because when I showed someone, when I was in the middle of watching this, I had stopped to hang out with some friends, and I was talking about them. It was right after this huge twist around episode 8, and I was like, guys, this show's crazy, and I pulled it up for them. I just pulled up like a picture, and you know, one of them had responded like, "Oh, it looks really nice." Like just looking at the picture, I was like, "That's the problem, though, because the problem is that it does look like a certain way, but it's not that way at all." And sometimes that brings like really tonal, like conflictions, where it seems like. So one of the big ones for me was there is a lot of like violence that just doesn't get played properly because of how cutesy it is. You know, like. There was a point where they were running away from some soldiers, and they were definitely like laying on the idea, like implying that if they got caught, that blue-haired girl was probably gonna like get raped. And then, you know, at the end, he like throws a dagger in the boy's arm, and like he's bleeding, and there's like a knife just in his body. But like none of this has any really sort of, you know, weight to it, because I'm not. There's a little bit, but just
it does
the overall,
feel slightly cartoonish.
Yeah, the overall presentation of what we're looking at just felt so cutesy and wholesome that like I wasn't buying into the danger of this. And I don't know, that to me, especially as we got later, the more and more I watched this, I would say like the one definitive problem I have with this series is that it was just a huge failure on like the art direction. And I'm not like an expert in this, so I can't like, you know, analyze that specifically, but it just seems like, I don't know, this could have been really good, but instead it was a bit awkward is how I would describe that.
Can I hop on this? Because
yeah, sure.
This, now that you mentioned it, like the cutesy art style definitely reminded me of Made in Abyss, which was a show that famously had cute characters that ended up getting into some pretty traumatic situations. And I don't know, like, I was trying to think of why the drama works so much better in Made in Abyss than it does here. Maybe it's because of, like, the overarching dread that one of these characters probably is going to die, because clearly whoever's writing this show is fucked up. But
I have not seen Made in Abyss, so I can't comment definitively. But if I could throw out a theory, I would say maybe it has to do with color as opposed to just designs, because well, I'm looking at Made in Abyss right now, and while I agree that they're both very cutesy designs, if you look at anything from Made in Abyss, that, you know, from what I'm seeing, it is really dark, you know, like
that
because
does,
the whole show
hold up.
The show takes place in like a tunnel, right, or like a cavern or something like that.
In Abyss, for the most actually.
Part. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a big dumb idiot, but it is notably dark, not like super, not like fucking black and white or anything, but it just, compared to, you know, Lost Song, which I would, I would recommend anyone watching to pull up references for both of these, because I do think they're different. Like if you look at the color palette for Lost Song, it's like pink and blue, and it's all this vibrant, you know, cheery colors, and I just, that is what I would maybe propose as the difference.
Possibly. I also think it might just be like willingness to actually hurt the characters, because, you know, with the Song of Healing, a character getting injured doesn't really mean much, but every time it seemed like one of our main characters might actually die, yeah, it didn't actually happen.
Yeah, so, that's true. There wasn't a lot of like I guess stakes. Well, there was, but it just very few characters actually died in this, or even really received all that much injury. But you touched on the song for a second, Song of Healing, and if I'm going to give this show one thing, well, actually this is a bit conflicted too, because I have two different sides of this, but I do think the Song of Healing in specific, this show's able to deliver on some slaps, which is to say, the music is pretty good. Wow. I actually added the Song of Healing to my playlist. I was like, I could fuck with it.
Huh. I mean, maybe I'm just a little edgy boy, but personally I preferred the Song of Destruction. Okay.
So that was my other side of this argument, or rather this debate in my head was the Song of Destruction. Why I didn't like it was because I was okay. So let me just describe what happens. Episode 8 comes by, or maybe like episode 7 or something. And what we learn about the show, and this is why I think the show is really interesting and like not at all what it presents itself to be, is that these two stories that we're hearing or we're seeing, one about this girl who wants to go to the capital to sing, and one about this princess who has also the same singing ability, is that we're led to believe that these are the same timeline, because why wouldn't they be? Turns out they're not. This girl, there's this whole I can't even fucking explain it. I tried to explain it to my friends and they were just like looking at me like I'm insane. Basically, I would describe it as like Steins Gate Light, where this this girl has such a fucked up tragic thing happen to her and then now she's forced to relive the universe over and over again because she can't fucking die, and she's slowly going insane, and now she's evil.
I related it to C2.
Okay, yeah, that's true. I haven't seen Code Geass, but I suppose that is also somewhat fair. But when you get to that scene where she does have the turn, where it's like, she sings the Song of Destruction. She is so torn by her lover being killed that she was forced to kill him, and she didn't realize it. That she's like, all right, fuck it, everything deserves to die. And I just, for some reason, it just didn't grab me. And I think it was because, while we had this, again, I am not an expert in music, so I can't really, put my expert analysis in here, but we had this really great instrumental track going that was super dramatic, orchestral, beautiful. And then the singer, who, is a good singer, but she was singing like she always did. And I was like expecting some, fucking belting out, screaming, and, I just didn't feel that sort of despair that I wanted to hear from, the Song of Destruction.
That makes sense. I definitely think they messed up with the music on a few fronts in the show, because honestly, the singing animation, or the singing doesn't really match up with the animation that well, because for one, the girls don't look like they're the ones singing. The voices don't match.
That was a huge problem that was a huge problem for me for the first couple episodes, where it felt like it didn't feel like it was singing. It felt like, like when you watch like a Disney movie, it feels like the characters are singing. This one felt like there is a song being played over the characters.
Exactly. Like it just didn't work as well. And it seemed like there were only a few moments in which the song was altered to fit the context in which it was being used in the show. Otherwise, it pretty much always sounded the same.
Like the same song? Or like, what do you mean by that?
Like the Song of Destruction and the Song of Healing always sounded the same, except for like a few one instance where Rin was singing the Song of Healing as a baby.
Well, to be fair, those two are supposed to sound the same. That's like the big thing. But I will say there's also like the Song of Wind or something like that, which also felt somewhat similar. It felt like they were sort of, I don't know. They didn't have a large variety to pull from for whatever reason here.
Yeah. So I mean, that might be like a pretty big nail in the coffin for a musical show, but
That's true. The other thing I was going to say is, so in comparison to, or rather, an example of a song that I would have really liked, matched for the Song of Destruction was, I don't know if you are familiar with the song, but it's called Burn. It's from Hamilton. And it's right after, Hamilton's wife finds out that he cheated. And she like, it starts off slow, but then it slowly just builds up and builds up as she's like getting angrier and angrier. And then by the end, she's like, get the fuck out of my house, get out. No one, I'm fucking removing myself from the situation. I hate you. I hate everyone. Leave. And I think by the end of that song, it's so powerful. And so I would, again, if you need a reference, I would recommend listening to that song, because that is kind of what I would like out of, Yeah, I need that you know what I'm talking about? That
yeah, that.
What are some of the things you liked or disliked about this?
Yeah, I don't want to keep like ripping on the show because there were more than a few elements I found charming. Like, I really liked how the rhythmists kept like ham boning every time they got excited or surprised. I got a kick out of that.
There was some quirky stuff where it's like, you know, if overplayed a bit more, I probably would have been annoyed. But you know, they just had like those two rhythmists had like little minor quirks that didn't show up all that often. But when they did, it was cute. Like the small one. She would just like pass out if things were too scary, and it only happened like 3 or 4 times. But you know, those 3 or 4 times, I was like, you know, I'm down. Like that was cute.
Yeah.
That was like funny. And then the you know, ham boning one, I was like, what is even happening? You know, this is not a real person. But you know, it happened so sparingly. It happened so sparingly that I thought it was more cute than it was like, you know, weird. I don't know. Maybe I came out of this more positive than you did, but I feel like I don't know. Everything I've said so far has been like a backhanded compliment, but it has been a compliment. And I do think, you know, to touch on that 7th or 8th episode, that is when I was like, this show has a lot more to offer than I thought it was, because, you know, at episode 3 or 4, or, you know, basically working up to that, I was like, yeah, the show seemed to have like one good moment at the end of episode 1, but then after that, you know, just seemed like maybe this, not that the show is bad, but maybe it's just not for me. And that's what I thought I would get going into this, looking at the promotional material and like seeing how bright and cutesy it was. I was like, this probably just isn't for me. You know, I don't usually like shows like this. But going into that episode 7 or 8, and it's like, to just give you guys, you know, context for if you haven't seen it, basically at the end of one episode, she sings the Song of Destruction and the world ends, you know, and then the next episode opens up and we were in ancient medieval times before for 7 whole episodes, no allusion to anything else. The next episode opens up and we're just in present day. And
yeah, when this happened, I wrote, what the fuck? It's the future now?
Yeah, and we're just in this astronomy lecture, and it's the guy we knew, like this knight that we knew as like Henry the Knight, and he was like this ultimate rookie, and he's like super fucking cool and badass. He's just delivering this lecture, and in the crowd you see the princess, and she's just, and you're like, what the fuck is happening? And it starts cutting to like these interviews with people who, like throughout time, of being like, yeah, I know this girl, yeah, it was like really weird, she was like a witch or something, and like then we see her burning at the stake and stuff. It's like, it's just crazy stuff. And it was just like that, those 2 episodes after that, the aftermath of the Song of Destruction, I thought were crazy. You know, so like that was like a big strong point for me. Now I don't like that it took so long to get there. I do understand, like, you know, even when Steins Gate did this, where it was like the first half of the show is just fairly normal, and then the second half is where like, holy shit, what the fuck's happening?
Yeah.
So I understand why it has to be like that. You know, probably didn't need to go to 7 or 8 episodes, but I do think that is probably a huge boon to the show. Any other things you liked or disliked?
Going back to Finnis, like, she kind of felt out of place in her own backstory. Like, she doesn't seem like a woman haunted by the abusive mistreatment she faced in the past. She kind of just looks like a really sad girl because her boyfriend died. And even like a millennia later, like, certainly not the heartless witch she's supposed to be, who's like using the Song of Destruction to like end wars.
So, you know, this kind of like goes into what I'm talking about with Steins Gate Light, where it just seems like if you handed the concept, and I'm talking like the fucking real basic concept of just, you know, a guy needs to go, or a person needs to go through they're experiencing life over and over again, and it's driving them insane, and you just handed that, like, here's your framework, go write a story, or here's your like core mechanism, go write your story. I think a really great writer comes out with Steins Gate, and then like an okay writer comes out with Lost Song. And I think a lot of that has to do with, you know, when I watched Steins Gate, I was like, holy shit, Okabe is going insane. As to where it was like, you know, watching this, it was like, oh, Finnis is like, she's going insane for those 2 episodes, and then just kind of like, you know, it kind of just mellows out to normal. So, you know, I do think that is definitely one of those aspects that goes into why I think this is not quite as good as something like that. And the other one I would just throw out there is that for Steins Gate, it really felt like, you know, while I do think those first 12 or so whatever episodes are a bit slow and could be cut down, even as much as I like that show, I still see that, when you watch Steins Gate, even if you don't know what's going to happen, there is still promise of this show paying off in a good way. Like there's still elements that, like, even if you don't know where it's going, that this is good. There's like certain executional aspects, like directing or whatever, where you're just like, I am having a good time and I think this is going to go somewhere, and I trust them to take me there. And like I said before, when I was watching Lost Song, if I was not obligated to review this in its entirety, then I would have never gotten to that episode and never gotten the switch, which I think is actually probably why this is a show that I've never seen anyone talk about. It's not at all popular, at least from what I could tell, because I don't see why anyone would get to that episode, or not like anyone, but I don't see why many people would get to this episode and be able to experience like what the story actually has to offer, because those first 6 or 7 episodes are like nothing special, they're just, I don't know. It just seems sort of, I don't know, not anything amazing. Anything else you like or dislike?
What do you think of Al as a character? I really liked how his gadgets were like powered by humility and started failing every time he started feeling proud.
Can't get a big head. I'm actually glad you brought this up, because I actually did have a note here. When I first watched it, there's a moment in maybe like episode 4 or 5 where they leave Al behind with like this inventor, and he does come back later in the series, but they say like, Al, this is what you want to do. You want to be a scientist. Stay with this guy. He's really smart. And we'll just keep going without you. It's fine. And there is some, it is pretty emotional because, brother and sister, or, maybe more, the old Flash treatment, where it's like maybe incest, maybe not. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe incest.
There is some tear jerking to that moment, and I had written down in my notes as I was going. I wasn't sure if getting rid of Al so early into the series was a good idea. I just wasn't sure what it was really bringing to the table. But then as I got to later in the series and we experienced that twist and everything, I was like, in hindsight, you should have got rid of Al sooner. In fact, you should have just never put Al in the show. I think I'm firmly of the opinion that I don't like Al, because looking at this character, I think he's the epitome of like why I had bad expectations of the show. I mean, it was a lot of things, but certainly he was one of them. It was just like, look at this guy. Got the thick frame glasses, huge circles, and he has like, I don't even know how to describe his hair, but he just like he's super cutesy. And it's like, I looked at this character, and of course I wasn't expecting, what we got, because this guy doesn't look like what we got, and that applies to everyone. But I felt like it really applied to Al and his inventions and his sort of quirky attitude and what he was bringing to the table. I thought you could fairly easily just remove him from the story, and I don't think it fixes everything, but I think it's a step in the right direction.
I like the character interactions we get with Al, but as far as like how much he actually adds to the story, I don't really like that moment where he comes back and just swoops in and saves everyone, or how he seemingly dies but doesn't die and then saves everyone. It's, I don't know. I guess they just wanted to make him feel useful at the end, but it just kind of seemed hollow.
Sometimes it's not worth it to bend over backwards to give your characters purpose, and instead, if they don't have a purpose, just remove them. If it's not working, it's not working. That is wise. You don't gotta do a backflip just to make it work. Yeah. Wise words with Hoodie. Actually, that is all of my notes about this show. I feel like I've said a lot, so I don't know if you have anything else, or you want to just clarify your recommendations more. But
well, I want to say I do like the basic idea of using singing to cast magic. I definitely think it works better in an anime than it would in a light novel or a manga. I don't know how much sound is incorporated in like a visual manga, but I do think it comes with more risks when you do it with anime, because people are expecting the actual, like, we've had AMVs for decades now. When it comes to matching anime and music, we have some pretty high expectations, and I don't know. It seems like this show didn't really deliver in the terms of like matching animation with music. In that said, it did still give us a fairly good plot and some characters that I found enjoyable, but it's not without its faults. And I don't know, maybe this is a little early, but personally, I didn't really enjoy this show. And I was kind of like you said, if I didn't have to watch it, I definitely wouldn't have finished it. And even like having to watch it, it was a slog to get through, honestly.
That is interesting. It was not a slog for me to get through after that whole twist. I was on board. This is usually the flip. I feel like usually I'm the one who's a bit more jaded and like this wasn't worth your time, and then you're the one who's like it was okay. But now I don't know. This was okay. I think just to jump into recommendations, I've already said mine, and again I want to clarify that I don't think this is an amazing show. I don't even think it's particularly good. I just think it fails in interesting ways, and I think it succeeds in interesting ways too. I think like the elements that are good could have been even better if done a little differently. And I think if you are interested in sort of like seeing the inner workings of story, and or not even just story, but like seeing how everything is, really understanding why everything is important, how like voice acting and singing, and combine that with editing and art direction, and how all of that can mingle together, and how if any one of them just starts to fall just a little bit, the whole thing could come crumbling down. I think that is an interesting thing that we don't always get to see, because usually when it feels like something is bad, at least for me, it tends to just feel like a complete miss. It just fucking complete strikeout. I don't see a lot of things that are able to exemplify these sort of attributes that I find personally fascinating. So like I said, I don't think this is an amazing show. I don't even particularly think it's good. This wasn't fucking Psycho-Pass or Steins Gate or, fucking Death Note or whatever. But I do think if you have like 4 hours to kill and you are just like, yeah, sure, I want to watch something kind of interesting, then, hey, maybe it's worth your time.
Maybe. And as Yahtzee Croshaw said, it's better to fail from overambition than laziness. So.
Do you have any further clarifications on your recommendation?
Not really. But this show should be called Kakashi Gaiden, because it's all about how sad it is that Rin dies at the end.
All right, I'm glad you managed to work in your one-liner there.
Thanks.
All right, everybody, that's going to do it for this month's Kato reviews. A bit shorter this time, but I feel like we actually said a lot. If you didn't know, we review JoJo's Bizarre Adventure weekly over on the second channel, so head on over to check that out. Link is in the description. We apologize for this one being a week late. It's kind of fuck up on our part, but things get busy. It is not replacing our December review, which will come at the end of the month. To get your choice at what that review will be on, head on over to patreon.com/KatoYT for details. Join cool kids such as Doji, Gage Lambert, H2 Mass, Paige Malter, Hunter 2011, Dick Writing Association, Lerpa Anuj, Spencer I Rule at Games, and of course, Wadzani Mafunde. I have been your host, Hoodie, joined as always by my co-host Zero, and we will see you soon.
Peace.